Ithorian Emperor Fornax laughed at the primitives over the screen, but he wouldn't be laughing when angry humans rained nuclear hellfire down on his arrogant alien ass. The day had started like any other for Starship Captain Stephen Richardson and his small trade vessel. They were running freight through an uncharted system on the edge of human space when the sleek chrome warship dropped out of hyperspace right on top of them, energy weapons blazing. The alien lasers sliced through the human ship's meager shielding in seconds, burning out systems across the hull. Engines down, weapons offline. Stephen's crew scrambled to restore power and assess the damage. That's when the unknown hostiles opened comms. On the view screen appeared a gray-skinned humanoid with black eyes and a crown of horns swooping back from his forehead. He introduced himself as Emperor Fornax of the Ithorian Empire, demanding the humans' immediate surrender. Fornax declared that this system and its resources now belonged to the Ithorians. He described humanity as a primitive, self-destructive species that would easily be conquered and subjugated. With a sinking feeling, Stephen realized he was face-to-face with mankind's first hostile alien encounter, and it was against a far superior foe. Fornax wasn't wrong. Humanity was divided, at war with itself. An advanced alien invasion force could roll over Earth's squabbling nations before they knew what hit them. The survival of the human race hung in the balance. Stephen had to buy time. He argued with Fornax, keeping the arrogant emperor talking while damage control teams rushed to bring weapons back online. Fornax just smirked, savoring the humans' futile defiance before his impending invasion of their homeworld. The Imperator powered up his ship's massive plasma cannons, aiming to wipe the impudent humans from the stars. But Fornax had badly underestimated human ingenuity and resolve. The human crew worked mechanical miracles, unexpectedly bringing their nuclear missile launchers online. Stephen didn't hesitate. He gave the order, "Fire everything!" A salvo of 50 megaton warheads shot out from the human ship's tubes and streaked towards the Ithorian warship. Fornax's eyes widened in shock as the human missiles slammed into his ship's hull, the nuclear blasts tearing through armor and bulkheads. Explosions chained through the vessel, cracking it apart. With a final groan of rending metal, the once mighty alien battlecruiser split in two, venting atmosphere and bodies into the void. Stephen sagged back in his command chair, scarcely believing they had survived. But there was no time to rest on this victory. He knew this was only the opening skirmish in what would be a long and brutal war for survival. They had to get back to Earth and sound the alarm before the Ithorians arrived in force. Upon returning to Earth, Stephen immediately met with the United Earth Council to warn them about the imminent Ithorian invasion. He strode into the council chambers, still wearing his scorched and tattered uniform from the battle. The council members stared in shock as Stephen recounted the details of the alien attack. He presented the data collected from the skirmish, including detailed scans of the advanced Ithorian ship and a chilling recording of Emperor Fornax's threatening message. "This can't be real," Ambassador Linton said, his face pale. "The Ithorians are a myth, a spook story spacers tell over too many drinks." "Does this look like a myth to you?" Stephen snapped, smacking his head on the holoprojector. An image of the Ithorian warship shimmered above the council table, all sleek lines and brutal angles. "I watched this myth kill my crew and nearly slag my ship. The Ithorians are very real, and they are coming for us." Faced with the irrefutable evidence, the council had no choice but to accept the grim reality of the situation. The debate raged for hours as military experts were brought in to devise a plan to counter the alien threat. In the end, they approved Stephen's proposal to rapidly militarize Earth's space fleet. Massive resources were poured into weapons development and ship construction. Shipyards burned with round-the-clock activity, pumping out new warships and weapons platforms. Legions of volunteers flooded recruitment centers, and boot camps sprouted up on every continent to churn out space marines. In recognition of his experience and leadership, Stephen was appointed Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Knowing the Ithorians possessed superior technology, Stephen advocated for a focus on nuclear weapons, which had proved effective against the aliens in the opening skirmish. Teams of top scientists were assembled and sequestered in secret research facilities. Their mission was to miniaturize nuclear warheads and develop specialized delivery systems optimized for space combat. As Earth girded itself for war, recon ships were dispatched to covertly monitor the borders of Ithorian space. It wasn't long before they detected massive fleets of Ithorian warships assembling in staging points beyond the Kuiper Belt, confirming an invasion was imminent. The recon missions also revealed a critical piece of intel. The Ithorians were a hive mind species, each individual just a part of the collective whole. This explained how their ships could operate with such perfect, seamless coordination in battle, making them lethally efficient. However, Stephen suspected this hive mind could also be a potential weakness. Take out the controlling intellect and the rest might fall into disarray. As the threat of full-scale interstellar war loomed, Earth received an unexpected lifeline. Other alien races, long oppressed under Ithorian rule, secretly reached out to humanity. These rebel aliens offered to share their advanced technologies with Earth in exchange for protection and a chance to throw off the yoke of Ithorian tyranny. A reptilian species called the Saurians revealed critical information. Ithorian ships were powered by a rare crystalline material called Zentrium. The Saurians had been forced to mine this for their overlords. They knew the location of the primary Zentrium mining facility deep in Ithorian space. If humans could strike it and destroy the supply, the Ithorian war machine would be crippled. Seeing an opportunity to deal a devastating opening blow, Stephen began planning a daring raid on the Zentrium facility. It was a risky gambit. The fleet was still green, and if the attack failed, they would be starting the war at a disadvantage. But if it succeeded, it could hobble the Ithorians before the main fighting even began. As preparations for the strike mission proceeded, the war came to Earth. A surprise Ithorian attack on a human outpost station near the neutral zone border caught the defenders off guard. The first shots of the conflict were fired, and the interstellar war had begun in deadly earnest. Stephen stood on the bridge of the flagship Titan, watching the combined human and alien rebel fleet assemble. Unbreakable spirit etched his features as he contemplated the monumental task before them. The survival of the human race and the freedom of a dozen worlds rested on his shoulders. Stephen swore he would meet the Ithorian onslaught with all the fury humanity could muster. He would lead the fleet to victory or die in the attempt. There could be no surrender, no retreat. This would be a vicious war to the bloody finish, a primal struggle where only one species would be left standing. The blaring of alarms jolted Stephen from his restless sleep. He sprinted to the bridge of the Titan, adrenaline surging. On the main view screen, a swarm of Ithorian warships dropped out of hyperspace. "Battle stations, all hands prepare for combat," Stephen barked. The human fleet scrambled to form up as the Ithorians opened fire. Energy beams lanced out, slamming into Earth's ships. Stephen gritted his teeth as the Titan shuddered under the barrage. "Return fire! Launch nuclear payloads!" Streaks of light erupted from the human vessels as they unleashed their devastating warheads. Blinding flashes lit up space as the nukes detonated against Ithorian hulls. Stephen watched grimly as enemy ships were torn apart by the blasts. But the Ithorians kept coming, their hive mind coordination allowing them to press the attack relentlessly. Human ships exploded left and right under the onslaught. "Sir, we've identified Fornax's command ship," the tactical officer shouted. Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Focus fire on that vessel. We need to take out their leader." The Titan poured everything it had into pummeling Fornax's ship. Nuclear detonations racked its hull until finally its engines sputtered and died. "Now's our chance," Stephen said. "Prep a boarding team. We're going after Fornax." Minutes later, Stephen watched the feed as the strike team blasted their way onto the crippled Ithorian vessel. The commandos fought tooth and nail through twisting corridors, mowing down waves of defenders. "Bridge secured," came the report as the team finally broke through. "We have Fornax in custody." Stephen allowed himself a grim smile. Maybe now they could turn the tide. But interrogating the Ithorian emperor proved futile. No matter what they tried, Fornax's mind linked to the hive allowed him to resist their efforts. Meanwhile, the war raged on. Stephen dispatched a task force to strike at the heart of Ithorian power, their Zentrium mining facility. The human ships tore through the defenders, fighting their way to the planet's surface. When the dust settled, a series of nuclear blasts reduced the vital facility to ash. The loss of their power source threw the Ithorian war machine into disarray. Seeing the humans' ferocious resistance, other subjugated races rose up against their Ithorian overlords. Across a dozen worlds, newly formed rebel armies turned on their masters. The Ithorians found themselves suddenly fighting on multiple fronts as their carefully laid invasion plans crumbled. But still, they refused to yield, pouring more ships and troops into the meat grinder. Then reports came in of Ithorian forces turning on each other. Rogue splinter groups, somehow cut off from the hive mind, lashed out indiscriminately at both sides. As Stephen pondered this new development, an idea began to form. If they could use Fornax to overload and disrupt the entire Ithorian psychic network. He strode purposefully towards the brig. It was time to end this war once and for all. Stephen strode into the lab, his face etched with dedication. The captured Fornax lay strapped to an operating table, surrounded by a team of Earth's top scientists. "Is it ready?" Stephen asked, his voice tense. Dr. Chen nodded, holding up a small device. "The psionic disruptor is complete. We're prepared to begin the implantation procedure." Stephen watched as the surgical team worked with precision, carefully inserting the device into Fornax's cerebral cortex. Hours passed, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, Dr. Chen looked up. "It's done. We're ready to activate on your command." Stephen took a deep breath. "Do it." With the flip of a switch, the disruptor hummed to life. Fornax's body convulsed, his eyes rolling back. On the monitors, Stephen watched as a wave of psychic energy pulsed outward. Alarms blared across the ship. "Sir, we're detecting massive system failures throughout the Ithorian fleet," the tactical officer shouted. Stephen rushed to the bridge, his heart pounding. The view screen showed chaos unfolding. Ithorian ships spun out of control, their weapons firing wildly into space. On the ground, alien troops collapsed, writhing in agony. "All ships, this is Admiral Stephen. Launch full-scale offensive now." Earth's fleet surged forward, unleashing a devastating barrage. Missiles and energy beams tore through the incapacitated Ithorian ships. Explosions bloomed across space as vessel after vessel succumbed to the assault. But even as they pressed their advantage, reports flooded in of Ithorian counterattacks. "Sir, we're detecting multiple strikes on our colonies," an officer reported grimly. Stephen clenched his fists. "Deploy stealth teams to neutralize those rogue elements. I want those bastards taken out." He turned his attention to the main Ithorian strongholds. "All forces, push forward. Take their shipyards, their supply depots, everything." The battle raged across multiple systems. Stephen watched as Earth's ships, newly bolstered by reprogrammed Ithorian vessels, systematically dismantled the alien war machine. After days of relentless fighting, a transmission came through. It was Fornax, his once proud demeanor now broken. "Enough," the alien emperor croaked. We surrender. Cease your attack, and we will withdraw from your territories permanently." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "And the disruptor?" Fornax's voice quavered. "We ask only that you deactivate it, please." Stephen considered for a long moment before responding. "Very well. But know this. If you ever threaten Earth again, we won't hesitate to use it." As the Ithorian fleets began their retreat, Stephen gathered his advisors. "This isn't over," he warned. "They'll be back, and in greater numbers. We need to be ready." He turned to his chief scientist. "I want new disruption weapons, bigger, more powerful, and start fortifying our outer systems. We've won the battle, but the war is nowhere near the end." Stephen Richardson stood at the helm of Earth's new orbital defense platform, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the solar system. The vast network of satellites, defense stations, and automated weapon systems stretched out before him, a testament to humanity's newfound vigilance. "Status report," he barked, his voice carrying the weight of recent events. A young officer approached, datapad in hand. "All systems operational, sir. The Jupiter outpost just came online, completing our outer perimeter." Stephen nodded, but his jaw remained tight. He knew this fortification was merely buying time. The Ithorians would return, and when they did, they'd come with a vengeance. In a secure lab deep beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Elena Kovacs peered into a microscope, her brow furrowed in concentration. The viral pathogen swirled in the petri dish before her, its complex structure a deadly dance of engineered destruction. "It's ready," she announced to the team of scientists gathered around her. Phase 3 trials confirm 100% effectiveness against simulated Ithorian neural tissue. The room fell silent, the weight of what they'd created hanging heavy in the air. One of the younger researchers spoke up, his voice trembling. Are we really going to use this?" Dr. Kovacs met his gaze, her eyes hard. "If it comes to it, yes, it's them or us." Back on Earth, Stephen paced the war room, surrounded by holographic projections of Ithorian space. Red dots flashed across the map, indicating massive fleet movements. "They're mobilizing," General Hawthorne reported, his face grim. "Our long-range scouts confirm it. They found a way to shield their ships from our disruptors." Stephen's fists clenched at his sides. He'd known this day would come, but the reality of it still hit him like a punch to the gut. "How long?" he asked. 2 weeks, maybe less," Hawthorne replied. Stephen closed his eyes, steeling himself for what had to be done. "Initiate Operation Nightfall," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Hours later, a fleet of stealth ships slipped silently through the void, each carrying a payload that would rewrite the course of history. As they approached the first Ithorian world, the lead pilot's hands shook on the controls. "Initiating viral dispersal," he reported, his voice cracking. "May God forgive us." The warhead streaked through the alien atmosphere, detonating in a series of silent flashes. For a moment, all was quiet. Then the screaming began. On the planet's surface, Ithorians writhed in agony as their neural networks collapsed. In orbit, massive warships spun out of control, their crews reduced to gibbering wrecks. The virus spread like wildfire, jumping from world to world through the very psychic links that had once been the Ithorians' greatest strength. Stephen watched the feeds in horror, his face ashen. The strategic displays showed Ithorian resistance crumbling across all fronts, but the human cost was beyond measure. Trillions of sentient beings, their entire civilization, wiped out in a matter of days. As the last Ithorian outposts fell silent, Stephen found himself alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the viewport. The man who looked back at him was a stranger, victorious but hollowed out by the weight of his actions. A knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called out, his voice hoarse. Dr. Kovacs entered, her lab coat wrinkled from days without rest. "It's done," she reported. "The virus has been contained and secured in the Omega Vault. What are your orders?" Stephen turned to face her, his eyes haunted. "Keep it locked down. We can't destroy it. Not when there might be other threats out there. But God help us if it ever gets out." As Kovacs left, Stephen turned back to the stars. The Ithorian threat was gone, but at what cost? He'd saved humanity, but in doing so, he feared they might have lost something essential about what it meant to be human. The comm unit on his desk chirped, pulling him back to the present. There was still work to be done, a galaxy to rebuild, alliances to forge. But as Stephen moved to answer the call, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory might have been the beginning of something far darker than any alien invasion.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.